The pharmacy receipt found in Linda Hayes's purse showed a purchase of pregnancy tests on September 14, 2023. 3 days later, she would be found dead in Millbrook Creek, a small waterway that winds through the heart of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The medical examiner would determine she had been strangled before being dumped in the shallow water. But the pregnancy test results would never be revealed to the public. What started as a missing person case in this town of 3,200 residents would expose a web of secrets involving the mayor, the police chief, and 3 of Millbrook's most prominent families. Linda Hayes, 26, had been the town librarian and keeper of more than just books. She possessed information that could destroy reputations, end marriages, and topple the carefully constructed social order that had governed this rural community. For decades, the secret Linda carried had the power to change everything. Hidden in her apartment, investigators would find a safety deposit box key and a handwritten note that read, "If something happens to me, check box 247 at First National." Inside that box lay photographs, documents, and recorded conversations that would reveal Millbrook's hidden corruption and ultimately identify her killer. But Linda's murder was not a crime of passion or a random act of violence. It was a calculated execution designed to protect a secret worth millions of dollars and political careers spanning generations. The killer had planned every detail, from the location of the body to the false alibis that would initially throw investigators off the trail. The truth would surface 6 months later when a construction crew discovered additional evidence buried beneath the town's new community center. That discovery would prove that Linda Hayes had been killed not for what she knew, but for what she was about to reveal to federal investigators about a conspiracy that reached the state capital. Millbrook, Pennsylvania sits in the rolling hills of Chester County, 40 miles west of Philadelphia. The town's main street features a collection of 19th-century buildings housing small businesses, a hardware store, and the library where Linda Hayes had worked for 4 years. Most residents commute to nearby cities for employment, but the town maintains its small-town character with annual festivals and a tight-knit community feel. Linda Hayes lived alone in a second-floor apartment above Thompson's Bakery on Main Street. She had moved to Millbrook from Pittsburgh in 2019 after completing her library science degree, attracted by the town's quiet atmosphere and the opportunity to run a small library independently. Colleagues described her as dedicated and friendly, someone who knew most residents by name and took pride in her work. Mayor Richard Coleman, 58, had led Millbrook for 12 years and came from a family that had controlled local politics for 3 generations. His construction company had built most of the town's new developments and maintained exclusive contracts for municipal projects. Coleman lived with his wife Margaret in a Victorian mansion on the hill overlooking Main Street. Police Chief Thomas Bradley, 49, had served the department for 22 years and maintained close relationships with the mayor and other local business leaders. Bradley's department consisted of 6 officers who handled routine patrols, traffic enforcement, and minor criminal matters. Serious crimes were typically referred to the county sheriff's department. The town's social hierarchy centered around a few influential families who controlled local businesses, served on the town council, and funded community events. These families had intermarried over generations, creating a network of relationships that influenced every aspect of local governance and business decisions. Linda Hayes failed to open the library on Monday morning, September 18, 2023, breaking a routine she had maintained for 4 years without exception. Margaret Thompson, who owned the bakery below Linda's apartment, noticed the library remained closed at 10 a.m. and called the police department to request a welfare check. Officer Janet Mueller arrived at Linda's apartment at 10:47 a.m. and found the door unlocked and partially open. The apartment appeared undisturbed, with Linda's purse sitting on the kitchen counter and her car keys hanging on their usual hook by the door. Her bed had not been slept in, and there were no signs of struggle or forced entry. Police Chief Bradley arrived at the scene at 11:15 a.m. and immediately called the county sheriff's department for assistance. A preliminary search of the apartment revealed Linda's cell phone on her nightstand, indicating she had not taken it with her when she left. Her car remained parked in its designated spot behind the building. The search for Linda Hayes began at noon with volunteers from the community joining police officers and sheriff's deputies. Search teams focused on walking trails, wooded areas, and the creek that runs behind Main Street. The search expanded throughout the afternoon to include neighboring farms and abandoned buildings. At 4:23 p.m., volunteer searcher Robert Martinez discovered Linda's body in Millbrook Creek, approximately half a mile downstream from the Main Street Bridge. The body was partially submerged in shallow water, caught against fallen branches that had prevented it from floating further downstream. Martinez immediately called 911 and marked the location for responding officers. County Sheriff Detective Sarah Williams arrived at the creek at 4:51 p.m. and secured the scene while waiting for the medical examiner and crime scene technicians. The body showed obvious signs of trauma, with visible bruising around the neck area suggesting strangulation. Linda's clothing was intact, and there were no immediate signs of sexual assault. The medical examiner's preliminary examination at the scene indicated Linda had been dead for approximately 12 to 18 hours, placing the time of death between late Sunday night and early Monday morning. The condition of the body and surrounding area suggested she had been killed elsewhere and dumped in the creek. Crime scene technicians found tire tracks in the muddy area near where the body was discovered. The tracks appeared fresh and came from a large vehicle, possibly a pickup truck or SUV. Investigators also recovered several items from the creek, including a torn piece of fabric that did not match Linda's clothing. Detective Williams established a timeline based on witness statements and security camera footage from Main Street businesses. Linda was last seen alive at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday evening, walking toward her apartment after having dinner at Murphy's Diner. The restaurant's security camera captured her leaving and heading north on Main Street. A canvass of the neighborhood revealed that several residents had heard a truck engine running behind the Main Street buildings around 11 p.m. on Sunday night. One witness reported seeing headlights in the alley, but thought nothing unusual about late-night activity in the commercial district. The crime scene investigation expanded to include Linda's apartment, where detectives found the pharmacy receipt and the note about the safety deposit box. Detective Williams obtained a warrant to search the bank box and discovered it contained photographs of several town officials in compromising situations and documents related to fraudulent construction contracts. Police interviews with Linda's co-workers at the library revealed she had been acting nervous and distracted in the weeks before her death. Library assistant Carol Jensen reported that Linda had been staying late several evenings, working on personal projects she refused to discuss with staff members. Detective Sarah Williams began her investigation by examining Linda's personal belongings and financial records. Bank statements showed regular deposits from her library salary and no unusual transactions. However, investigators found a second bank account Linda had opened 3 months earlier, containing $15,000 in cash deposits that could not be explained by her regular income. The safety deposit box contents provided the first major breakthrough in the case. Photographs showed Mayor Coleman meeting with construction contractors in private settings, apparently discussing projects that had not been publicly announced. Documents in the box detailed bid rigging schemes and kickback arrangements involving multiple town contracts, dating back 5 years. Williams discovered that Linda had been systematically documenting corruption in Millbrook's government for months. Her apartment contained a hidden camera and recording equipment, suggesting she had been gathering evidence through covert surveillance. Audio recordings found in the safety deposit box captured conversations between Coleman and contractors discussing illegal payment arrangements. The investigation revealed that Linda had contacted the FBI's Philadelphia field office 2 weeks before her death, requesting a meeting to discuss potential federal crimes in local government. FBI Special Agent Michael Torres confirmed that Linda had scheduled an appointment for September 20th. 2 days after she was found dead. Cell phone tower data showed that Linda's phone had been active until 10:47 p.m. on Sunday night, when it stopped transmitting signals. The last call on her phone was to an unknown number that investigators traced to a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in the neighboring town of Westfield. Detective Williams learned that Mayor Coleman had been out of town during the weekend of Linda's death, attending a conference in Harrisburg. Hotel records and conference attendance logs appeared to confirm his alibi. However, GPS data from Coleman's personal vehicle showed unexplained travel patterns that did not match his stated itinerary. The investigation uncovered a pattern of intimidation, tactics used against residents who had questioned town government decisions. Linda's library computer showed she had been researching legal protections for whistleblowers and had downloaded information about witness protection programs. She had also been corresponding with an attorney specializing in government corruption cases. Forensic analysis of the tire tracks found near Linda's body matched the tread pattern of tires used on Ford F-150 pickup trucks. Investigators identified 12 residents of Millbrook who owned vehicles matching this description, including Police Chief Bradley and 2 members of the town council. Williams discovered that Linda had been receiving threatening phone calls in the weeks before her death. Phone records showed multiple calls from untraceable numbers, with messages that warned her to stop asking questions about town business. Library staff confirmed that Linda had seemed frightened and had asked about security cameras for the building. Investigation revealed that the construction contracts Linda had been investigating were worth over $3 million collectively. The fraudulent billing practices and kickback schemes she had documented represented potential federal charges for conspiracy, mail fraud, and money laundering. The financial impact on the town's budget was substantial. Detective Williams learned that Linda had been planning to leave Millbrook permanently. She had given notice at the library effective October 1st and had been making inquiries about job opportunities in other states. Her decision to leave appeared to be motivated by fear for her personal safety rather than career advancement. Interviews with Linda's family in Hazel, Pittsburgh revealed she had asked her sister to keep important documents for her in case anything happened. These documents included copies of the photographs and recordings found in the safety deposit box, serving as backup evidence that Linda had prepared in case her original evidence was destroyed. The investigation uncovered connections between the corruption schemes and state-level political figures. Several of the contractors implicated in Linda's evidence had also worked on state highway projects, suggesting the fraud extended beyond Millbrook's town limits. This discovery prompted the involvement of the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. The investigation took a dramatic turn when construction workers breaking ground for Millbrook's new community center discovered a buried metal box containing additional evidence. The box held computer hard drives, financial records, and a confession letter written by Linda Hayes that had been sealed in waterproof containers. The letter revealed that Linda had been working as an undercover informant for the FBI for 6 months before her death. The confession letter explained that Linda had been recruited by federal agents after she inadvertently witnessed a cash exchange between Mayor Coleman and a construction contractor in the library parking lot. The FBI had equipped her with surveillance equipment and had been building a case against multiple officials when she was killed. Williams learned that Linda's real name was Linda Patterson, and she had been relocated to Millbrook as part of a federal witness protection program. She had been hiding from threats related to her testimony in a previous corruption case in Pittsburgh, where she had worked as an accountant for a construction company. Involved in bid-rigging schemes, the buried evidence revealed that Police Chief Bradley had discovered Linda's true identity and FBI connections through unauthorized access to federal databases. Bradley had been selling confidential information to criminal organizations for years, using his law enforcement credentials to access restricted government records for profit. The most shocking revelation came from audio recordings that captured a conversation between Bradley and Mayor Coleman discussing Linda's murder. The recordings showed that Coleman had hired a professional killer from Philadelphia to eliminate Linda and make her death appear to be a random crime. The killer had been paid $50,000 from funds embezzled from town construction projects. FBI surveillance footage, previously unknown to local investigators, showed the actual murder taking place behind the library building. The footage captured Coleman's hired killer strangling Linda and loading her body into a stolen pickup truck. Bradley was seen directing the killer to dump sites and providing inside information about police response procedures. The investigation revealed that Linda's pregnancy test purchase had been part of her cover story to explain her nervous behavior. To library staff, she had not been pregnant, but had used a pregnancy scare as an excuse for her frequent absences and secretive phone calls while gathering evidence for federal investigators. Detective Williams discovered that the corruption scheme extended far beyond Millbrook, involving a network of small-town officials across 3 counties who had been coordinating fraudulent contracts and kickback arrangements. Linda's evidence had been crucial to exposing this regional conspiracy that had stolen millions of dollars in public funds. The buried evidence included photographs of a meeting between Coleman, Bradley, and 5 other municipal officials from neighboring towns. The meeting had taken place at a hunting lodge where they divided territories for their fraudulent activities and established protocols for sharing information about federal investigations. Further analysis of Linda's hidden evidence revealed that she had been planning to testify before a federal grand jury about the regional corruption network. Her testimony would have implicated over 20 officials and contractors in a conspiracy that spanned 5 years and involved dozens of fraudulent contracts. The investigation uncovered that Coleman and Bradley had been monitoring Linda's communications through illegal wiretaps on her phone and apartment. They had discovered her FBI connections and had been planning her murder for weeks before carrying out the killing. The most disturbing revelation was that Linda had recorded a final message on the night of her death, activated by a panic button the FBI had given her. The recording captured her final moments and provided direct evidence of Coleman's involvement in her murder and the broader conspiracy. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania filed federal charges against Mayor Richard Coleman and Police Chief Thomas Bradley on March 15, 2024. Coleman faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and mail fraud. Bradley was charged with murder for hire, obstruction of justice, and violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The hired killer, identified as Vincent Marconi of Philadelphia, was arrested at his home and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. Marconi had a long criminal record and had been working as a contract killer for organized crime families in the Philadelphia area. His cooperation with federal prosecutors provided crucial testimony about the murder conspiracy. Coleman and Bradley were denied bail due to flight risk concerns and the serious nature of the charges. Both men hired prominent criminal defense attorneys, but the overwhelming evidence against them made plea negotiations difficult. The federal prosecutors were seeking life sentences for both defendants. The trial began on August 12, 2024. With extensive media coverage due to the small-town corruption angle, and Linda's undercover work for the FBI. FBI Special Agent Torres testified about Linda's recruitment and the evidence she had gathered during her months of covert surveillance. Activities. The prosecution's case included the audio recordings of Coleman and Bradley discussing Linda's murder, FBI surveillance footage of the killing, and financial records showing the flow of money from fraudulent contracts to personal accounts. Digital forensics experts testified about the methods used to recover evidence from the buried hard drives. Linda's sister provided emotional testimony about Linda's fear in the weeks before her death and the documents Linda had asked her to keep safe. The testimony established Linda's state of mind and her awareness that she was in danger from the on. Officials she was investigating, Vincent Marconi, testified under a plea agreement that reduced his sentence to life in prison without parole in exchange for his cooperation. His testimony provided detailed accounts of how Coleman had hired him to kill Linda and the specific instructions he had received about making the murder appear to be a random crime. The defense strategies for Coleman and Bradley focused on challenging the admissibility of the secretly recorded conversations and arguing that their clients had been entrapped by federal agents. However, the evidence was overwhelming, and the defense arguments failed to gain traction with the jury. Expert witnesses testified about the scope of the corruption scheme and the financial damage to Millbrook and surrounding communities. The total amount of stolen funds exceeded $8 million, and the fraudulent practices had resulted in substandard construction and safety violations in multiple public buildings. The trial's most dramatic moment came when prosecutors played Linda's final recording, captured through the FBI panic button device. The recording provided direct evidence of Coleman's presence at the murder scene and his directions to Marconi about disposing of Linda's body. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges for both Coleman and Bradley. The convictions carried mandatory life sentences for the murder-related charges, ensuring both men would die in federal prison. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Coleman to life in prison plus 75 years. For the additional charges, Bradley received life in prison plus 50 years. The sentences reflected the severity of their crimes and their abuse of public trust in positions of authority. The Millbrook corruption case resulted in the complete transformation of the town's government and the implementation of new oversight procedures for municipal contracts. Linda Hayes' sacrifice exposed a criminal network that had been operating for years and prevented millions of additional dollars from being stolen from taxpayers. Mayor Coleman and Police Chief Bradley were transferred to different federal facilities to serve their life sentences. Their convictions led to the overturning of dozens of municipal contracts and the recovery of over $4 million in stolen funds. The money was returned to Millbrook's treasury and used for legitimate community improvements. The investigation resulted in additional arrests and convictions of 12 other officials and contractors involved in the regional corruption network. The federal task force that grew out of Linda's case became a model for investigating small-town corruption across the country. Millbrook elected a new mayor and hired a new police chief from outside the community to ensure a fresh start. The town implemented new transparency requirements for all government contracts and established citizen oversight committees to monitor municipal spending and decision-making processes. Linda Hayes was posthumously awarded the FBI Director's Community Leadership Award for her courage in exposing corruption and her sacrifice in service to justice. The Millbrook Library was renamed in her honor, and a scholarship fund was established to support young people pursuing careers in public service. The case prompted legislative changes in Pennsylvania requiring enhanced background checks for municipal officials and mandatory reporting of suspected corruption to state authorities. New laws also provided stronger protections for whistleblowers and established penalties for officials who retaliate against those reporting misconduct. The regional corruption network that Linda exposed had been operating for over a decade, suggesting that similar schemes may exist in other small communities across the country. Federal authorities used the Millbrook case as a template for investigating corruption in rural areas where oversight is often limited. Linda's courage in risking her life to expose corruption serves as an inspiration to others who witness wrongdoing in their communities. Her story demonstrates that one person with determination and moral courage can make a difference, even when facing powerful and dangerous adversaries. The case raises important questions about the vulnerability of small communities to corruption and the need for citizens to remain vigilant about their local government's activities. How many other small towns might harbor similar secrets, and what can residents do to prevent corruption from taking root in their communities? Linda Hayes paid the ultimate price for her commitment to justice, but her sacrifice prevented countless future victims of the corruption she exposed. Her legacy continues to inspire federal investigators and local officials working to ensure transparency and accountability in government at all levels.